Hello. Good morning, everyone. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. One of the things that I think is important is that you can hear me, because one of the things yesterday, I was sitting in the front row, at times I couldn't hear some of the people, and I know my hearing's bad, but I didn't think it was that bad. But if people can't hear, you can't hear me here, they're certainly not going to hear on the other end of the feed that's being fed out of this room to people all around the world. I think it's also something when you come to the Q&A is to hold the mic a little closer, that there's good volume back for the people. So I'm Brian Horn. I've been involved in networking since the beginning of Ethernet. I remember things like 10 base 5, so that tells you how old I am. I founded Winters Broadband as an ISP I own in California in 2002, and spun off the training and consulting part of that as a company called WISP TRACON in 2014. And so what I try to do when we come to conferences like this is give you some feedback on what I've learned from our experiences. And part of it is, in being an ISP and also doing consulting, and also I'm a trainer, is we're actually eating our own dog food. As you know, we're having to have it every day, work in our own networks. And so we understand exactly what it takes. So I got one or two questions to ask you, so I just understand what the audience comprises of. Is, by show of hands, how many of you are a WISP or an ISP? Oh, good. So we got the right type of audience. How many of you provide a service where you manage the service at the customer premises at the moment? Oh, quite a few. Good. So you'll be able to compare what I've done to what you're doing. And how many of you have implemented IPv6? Okay, it's getting going. Good. So I think the thing with service provisioning is there used to be the concept of a demarcation point. That came from the ideas of that when we were getting DSL or phone services, AT&T, whoever it was, would provide the service at a point. Beyond that point, the problem was yours. So when you look at that demarcation point, we have something like that in our business, is what is it, a bridge or a router? What are you putting there? And who has access to that device? Because if things can change, it can get a little complicated. And then, depending on how you handle that, is how do you handle customer issues, where there's no service is slow, or the service is intermittent. This is as far as the customer is concerned. And what do you tell the customer if you just go to him and say, okay, the service is working fine as far as I'm concerned, the problem's in your home? Well, he's not going to be very happy. That's what I've found. And he's likely to consider alternative options, which is great for us, I'll tell you, because we get a lot of business from our competition where they've basically told the customer, the problem's yours, don't call us, call whoever, Netgear, whoever you have. So I'm going to look at these different things and get into some detail for you on those. So why did we provide managed services? So we looked at it back in 2011 already, and at that stage, 90% of the calls that we were getting had nothing to do with our service. There were problems in the customer home. The customers expected us to provide support for problems they had in their home. And if you start doing that the moment you try helping with a PC, or you're helping with a printer, or the router, or whatever he had, you got yourself into a really bad loop there. Because whenever anything goes wrong after that, you're going to get the call. So it's costing you money, and it's wasting your time. So we took a careful look at it, and our business was being a WISP. We went out there to try and provide technical support services to HP, ASUS, Belcom, whoever else was providing the equipment. So one of the problems we had at that stage in looking at it, if you looked at the different routers that were there, for example, you had this unbelievable list of them. And the thing about those routers, too, is when HP or ASUS or whoever manufactures a router, they got no intention of providing updates for it. They'll manufacture 200,000, 300,000, whatever it is. They ship them out the door, and unless there's something recall or something catastrophic, they will do nothing about it. They're not going to put software upgrades in them. So they move on to the next model, because then there's a newer one to sell. That's why you go to Best Buy, and there's always something better, bigger, it's got bigger antennas on it, something that the salesman's selling you there. So what we looked at for is something that had a consistent user interface across the products. We didn't want to have to learn different products there. And so for us, MikroTik worked out very well, because we could have them in the data center or the NOC, at the tower sites, and the customer. There was one user interface, maybe different processes, but the user interface was the same. One set of training, and your people could really get to know it pretty well. The other thing was software upgrades and support. Well, with MikroTik, the software upgrades are great. There's this ongoing list of bug fixes, upgrades, and features that are put into it, as you've seen, like with 6.41, with the bridging, switching enhancements there. Now, MikroTik's support is not the greatest. Well, let's be clear about this. You need to know what to give them. So if you give them the information, the sub-out file, and all the rest, you've got to do your work first. So the thing with MikroTik is, provided you've got the knowledge of the products, and you've been trained on them, and you're using them, they are really a great set of devices there. And of course, the one big thing about it is really the cost-effective pricing. And no maintenance contract prices, and no software upgrade prices. So we introduced managed service offerings in 2011. At this stage, we're over 1,000 devices that we manage out there for people. And the managed devices come from a slew of products that are there. These are the ones we're currently using today. HAPC Lite is the main one. The one that may look a little odd in there at the end is the HXPoE. But one of the things we do is we actually end up helping work with customers, especially contractors, when they're building homes, with a bigger home, a whole lot depends on where you put the AP. So if you plug it into a wall outlet that's down here, like some of the little APs you can get, well, your coverage is not going to be so good depending on what's in the way. So the positioning of the AP is very important. And if you get a contractor come to you from the beginning, and you've got the reputation of providing the service, you get the opportunity to design it for them. And that's where we end up with something like HXPoE as the main router in the home, with WAPs around the house, ceiling mounted and places like that. So the way we did it, initially we provided it as an option, and we were charging $30 a year for the service. We sell when we do the install, the CPE and the router, or whatever equipment we provide, become the property of the customer. I don't know about other states, but in California, if we maintain it on our books, it's an asset, and then we're paying property taxes on it, and we got to keep track of all the lot. It's easier, we just sell it. We own the network, we provide the service. And also, people, if there's no perceived value and you're giving them free and there's just a monthly charge, they'll just walk away from it too. So we do it that way around. We had a problem with it, though, is it works very well with $30, but then 1 year later, you run a $30 charge on somebody's credit card, and you start getting phone calls. Why am I being charged $30 extra this month? So each year, we just ended up with these phone calls. So we decided in 2015, well, we're going to get rid of that problem. Just came out with a new service plan, rolled the price into the service plan, so it's just part of the monthly charge. And that solved that. We also use the routers to power the CPE, as the one when they came out with the 951s and the 952s. We power them from that. We got rid of the PoE. So that we got rid of that there. There isn't an option as to whether you have it or not. It's there. If you want to provide your own Wi-Fi, that's fine. We just turn the Wi-Fi off in the device. It's just a managed device that's there. And it's IPv6 enabled. And based on these products, we then can create custom solutions for whatever the home needs. Now, one of the things that's really happened and changed is the Internet of Things. Nowadays, there are so many devices in a home. Typically, we see 20 to 40 is not unusual. Things from all the normal things you'd expect, the iPads, the phones, everything else. Sound systems. Of course, you've got all your streaming devices. Now you've got the cooktops, you've got the refrigerators, everything else is now starting to get connected as well. The one problem with a lot of the devices is when they connect, they don't only connect to the network, they also decide they're going to be an AP. So that creates a problem for you when you've got something else that's competing for the space out there. So with up to 5 Wi-Fi access points in a home, which is what we see up to nowadays in bigger homes, the customers expect the devices to be plug and play. They got no concept of frequency assignment or interference. I mean, as far as they're concerned, they're just told by the salesman at Best Buy, this is the best router to buy. It's $150 or $200. The fact that it's worth a fraction, that's another matter. But you go put it in, it'll work. Higher powered devices are better, another salesman pitch. And the higher powered devices are better. Bigger antennas on it, it must be better. They forget about the fact that what's the coverage going to be in the home? So that's an issue that's there. And we'll take a look at this. There's no concept of firewalls, of bandwidth utilization, or of traffic prioritization. So it's fine if you're in the city and you're getting a 100 megabit per second or a gigabit per second, gigabit Ethernet connection to the thing. But when you're in the rural environment, like the services we provide services up to 25 megabits per second. But you end up with a 4K TV streaming video, and how much of that bandwidth is being used? So you have to do it differently if you don't have that bandwidth available. The other thing to remember as a WISP, that most of your links, unless you've got licensed links, are half duplex. So they're either transmitting or receiving. They can't do both. So if it's streaming one way at 25 megs, there's a lot less bandwidth, upload availability. The other thing is, there was a lot of emails recently on WISPer about the subject of managed routers in the last few weeks. And one person said, well, I just solved the problem by telling the customer to plug his laptop into the PoE. Well, that was not going to be in business very long, because I don't know about you guys, but the one thing I find is that some of these customers have nothing that has an Ethernet port on it anymore. The stuff's all Wi-Fi enabled, and unless they go buy a USB to Ethernet adapter, that's not going to be possible. So, that answer, if it's working for you now, it might not work off the next upgrade. One of the things there, by the way, just something I just thought of, is one of the problems we do have is when we put a managed router in, or customers had his own router there, he may have bought it 5 years ago, and he doesn't realize that that thing only had 2G, or only has 2G in it, and its performance in terms of its CPU and the rest is fairly low. Things have moved forward, and sometimes what you have to explain to them is, think about it. When did you get that? Well, I got it 5 years ago. And your iPhone or that, when did you get that? Oh, that's the last 2 years. And your laptop, how long have you had that? They forget that there's that other piece that needs to be upgraded. Technology moves forward, and that has to happen as well. So the benefits of it is customer satisfaction. They call you, they can get pretty prompt resolution with regard to the issues of no service, intermittent service, or the slow service, because you can take a look and see what's happening, and we'll take a look at how we can do this. Also, service irregularities. There can be things that you won't see through the router. So how do we handle that? We'll take a look at that. Managed troubleshooting. You've got a known configuration. You've got extensive diagnostics in the MikroTik products. We'll look at that. We still do offer chargeable calls. So if we have to go out, and we do go through the fault finding with people, is the device powered up? Yes. You sure it's powered up and the light's on it on? Okay, so the power's on it. Sometimes you find the power strip's been turned off by a kid. Is the red light on that's powering the CPE? No. Well, has somebody swapped the cables around? Once you get through that, it's okay. So, okay, we'll do a service call, and there's a charge for it. But if the problem is ours, there's no charge. But if we're coming out, they simply just plug the cables back into the right ports because somebody was playing around with it, then it's going to cost you something. There is increased ROI on providing the services. You're selling the products, you can make a small margin on them, and you can get some revenue. We only make $2.50 a month on a customer. But the big thing for us, it reduces the number of staff we need from a technical support side. And it also reduces the truck rolls. Because the moment you do a truck roll and it's 20 to 30 minutes to get to a customer, 20 to 30 minutes back, you've lost an hour and a half to 2 hours of staff time. And so the savings there are considerable. The other thing is, what we do have is we have an upgrade path. So we have bug fixes where issues can be resolved. And it's one of the things, if you're not one of the older releases before 6.40, you should be looking at upgrading, because if you're not aware of it, there is ways that routers can be compromised. What you'll find is that you won't get back into your router as the password's been changed. Product enhancements come out regularly from MikroTik on that, and of course it makes it very easy to deploy IPv6. So what I'm going to look at briefly is configuration and diagnostics, and then I'll go you through some case studies for you and show you the sort of things that we found. So you've got a lot of tools there. So on the configuration option side, there's the firewall. This is where you can set the protection for the device, whatever you're protecting against, incoming traffic, etc., and the port forwarding. And one of the big things for us is we manage that. We work with the security companies, because a lot of people put in security systems. The security company calls us directly. They know exactly what information we want. Within seconds, we have it configured for them. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on the phone with a customer trying to get his port forwarding working. Queues, bandwidth control. It's something that is needed nowadays when it comes to, and we'll show you with the case studies, with regard to if you've got limited bandwidth to a customer, you can't let a streaming device just use all of it. Graphing is something that's in the products. And if you haven't ever turned it on, it's well worth turning on, because the graphs are there, and you can provide that as feedback to the customer as to, well, my service hasn't been working for the last 48 hours or something. Send the graph back as saying, well, you've been using 9 megabits per second for the last thing. Where's it been going? It's the same thing in the queues. You've got the statistics on the counters there as how much has been used. We reset those at the beginning of each month, and as a result, you can show a customer, well, maybe you've had no service for 5 days, and it's the 5th day of the month, but how come you moved so many gigabytes of data? Somebody was using something. Wireless access lists, and I'll show you, they can be useful, and I'll show you where in the case studies. And then the SSID, because we manage the devices and we manage the wireless in the devices for the customer, we want to know if they're ours. Most of our customers are in low-density rural area, but we do have some high-density areas. And you need to know if you're picking up a signal that you've got control over. So what we do is we WB dash, and then the account number effectively we put in is the SSID. That way we can see if we see something in there that is a problem, we can log into that one. We don't have to try and figure out, where's the signal coming from. The one thing about this is, remember to export and save the configuration you put into customer routers. Because if you've gone into a lot of trouble, and I think, for example, one veterinary surgeon that we have in the hospital thing, and they've got a lot of port forwarding and the cameras and things. If we lose a router and it has to be replaced, or it gets compromised, how do you get it back? You don't want to have to start from scratch reinventing it. So remember to, save the configuration, not backup, do as an export, because the backup will change the MAC addresses if you bring it back into a new router. Okay, diagnostics is a lot of diagnostics there that are available to you. We'll go through some of them, and I'll show you what they are. The one thing there is well, let's go through them, and then I'll see if I miss any. So when we look at interface statistics, just looking at some of the things, and these are the things that you need to look at, be able to, and your staff get to know to look at pretty quickly as to go through and diagnose and what's wrong. So interface statistics, you can see if you've got errors. So are there errors on the link? Yeah, that could be causing problems. Interface status, what is the being advertised, what is connected. You can see the link up and down times. You can see how many times the link has been up and down. Useful information that's there. Wireless registration, you can see who's connected and the signal strengths. And this is an important part of it. And when we go through the case studies, you'll see we use it. Wireless scan, if you're using, I'm not going to mention other brand names, but if you're using other brands and you get a CPE that you're using in an access point and you've set the channel width to 20 megahertz and you do a scan, you're only going to see the devices on 20 megahertz channel width. You won't see the others. So here we have a router that's in someone's home, and what you're seeing is it's actually picking up one of our access points, which we name them 3 characters at the end as a code tells us which one it is. But you can see the first and last lines in that are a device that's on channel 5745, and it's operating on 80 megahertz channel width. So your CPE would not see that in a scan if it's certain megs, because it's not on 20 megahertz. The C is the control channel, the E's are the expansion channels. Now, if say this customer is getting service probably from NDM, so we're on 5825, we're okay, because that 80 megahertz is below us. But remember, if you've got a 23, 25 dB gain antenna, CPE on somebody's roof, and he's got something in the home that's on 80 megahertz channel width and is going into your band, he's creating interference back to his own device. So it's really useful to be able to do that. The other thing, remember, is if you, with about 6.35, the concept of background scans was introduced. And so you don't end up disconnecting the service to the customer if you're on that release. Moving on, diagnostics, of course, the op table is rather important. And if you were one of those people who got compromised, or some of the devices got compromised through one of either the Ubiquiti, for example, had a problem with their software where it got compromised, then what you'd see is you end up now with a number of devices with an IP address all with the same MAC address. You're not going to get to any of those. IP neighbors is another good tool to see what you have there. When it comes to diagnostics, Torch can be very, very useful. And I'll explain in one of the case studies. But you can go into Torch, as you see on the right-hand side, and you can, if you click on the TX or RX rate, you can get it so that it'll show you the ones that are being used the most. So yeah, at this stage, you see something is using 6 megabits per second, and you can go and you can see the IP address of the device and what it's connected to. You can actually then go in and take a look with like who is and see who they're connected to. And this will make a bit of sense as to how we could use this when I show you on some of the case studies. DHCP server is also really useful because now you know from the one before that you've got this device there. Well, I'll give you an example. We had a person call in and he said, I'm paying for 9 megabits per second, I'm getting 1. And it's okay, well, you're using 9. Well, I'm not. I run my speed test, I'm using 1. So yeah, you end up with this argument. What you can do, plug it into the PoE, doesn't work that way. They don't want to know that lot. So what you do, you see who's using it. We saw there one person was using most of the bandwidth. You can pin it down, you can say, okay, somebody on your network is using the bandwidth, they're streaming from Amazon, for example. Well, I don't know who that is. Well, we know the IP address. We can look up the MAC address. We put in the first with MAC address lookup. We can go see what type of devices it is. We can say, okay, it's a Linksys device, for example. This customer was pretty insistent it wasn't there. So the really easy thing then is, well, you'd mind if we turn that service off? So And I remember it was an iPad, and it was something like Susie's iPad. And it said, no, that can't be. So, okay, can we turn it off? Sure. And a few minutes later, you hear the screaming on the other end as Susie's suddenly lost her service. And Dad, what's happened to my service? You know, this is what you can see. And there are cases, we've had a case where a customer has called in and there's something using the bandwidth, and they say, nope, it's not one of our devices. We don't recognize the name. Can we turn it off? We turn it off, and nope. See, it wasn't one of our devices. So, well, we turned it off. It solved the problem. 2 days later, they call back and they tell you what in the home's not working, and because, you know, remember, we're turning this off for you because it's causing the problem. The log is also another very, very useful place to look for things. And these tools, you know, depending on which ones you use, depend on the circumstances. We had a problem a few months back, it was about 2 iOS upgrades back, where Apple messed up something in the wireless side on the iPhones and that. What we did is we would have an SSID in the home which was on 2G and on 5G. And after the iOS upgrade, the iPhones or iPads would switch, continually switch between the 2G and the 5G AP. And the only way we picked the first sign of that was in the log, where it's being picked up on one or the other. So it was just switching backwards and forwards, and this was the intermittent service they were getting. So what we had to do, we had to go change the SSIDs to -2G and -5G, so they connect to one or the other. And then, of course, you can also see there could be errors in the log that would come up, like FC errors that you would see there. Of course, you've got bandwidth test. You've got IP scan that are out there. Remember, bandwidth test that only shows you the free bandwidth, not what's being used. So you actually really have to look at the interfaces when you're running a bandwidth test to see what the actual bandwidth you have there. So if you look at some customer case studies, we put a firewall in place and really putting the protection in for the customer network and then putting the port forwarding in that, normally for security systems and other devices they want. We have, and we do put in a bandwidth utilization where required, but then we make the customer aware that we are limiting this device to a streaming device to 6 meg, and that in the event that you run a speed test from that device, you're only going to see 6 meg. And if say he's paying for 9, so there's 3 that won't be used by that device. That's something that we've had to do there. Wireless connectivity, we had one customer came to us, they got a special needs child, and so they insisted that at sort of 7 in the evening, his iPad and his phone got turned off. He'd go to his bedroom and do his homework, or 6, whatever it was, and he didn't have the service during the evening. The only problem they found is the kid was quite smart. What he would do, just borrow a phone or something from one of his friends. He could say, okay, Mom, yeah, I'll even leave my phone and my iPad with you and go work in my room. And of course, he wasn't working. He just using a borrowed device. So they asked us if we could do something there. So what we did, just lock down with the access list as to what can attach, and then set the time of day when the devices could attach. So it was an added value service provider, which make the customer really happy. The thing with these things are when you do those types of things, the referrals, you know, you get positive referrals, and most of our new clients come from word of mouth, as existing clients passing the info on. And of course, traffic prioritization for voice over IP devices. So if we look at no service, you know, one of the things there is to find out from the customer, you know, they call in and say, I got no service. And then, well, how many devices have got no service? Mean no service? Or is it just some device? Oh, no, it's, you know, the new phone I bought. Then you can have a look and see why it's not connecting. You know, you've got the tools you can look at there. If it's all devices, of course, something could be powered down, cables unplugged. And then if there's no service to cameras or something, it could be something where it was a dynamic address. It hadn't been set to static. The address had changed. Slow service, of course, normally relates nowadays to streaming devices using up all the bandwidth. And I never forget, about a year ago or so, there was this elderly couple called in and said, our service is really bad. And said to them, well, they're only paying for 3 megs. And I said, well, you're using it all? No, we're not. So I said, well, what devices have you got in the home? Well, there's only, I got a laptop and my husband's got a laptop. And so I'll get him to turn his off. So he turns his off. I said, you're still using 3 meg. He said, I'll turn mine off. I said, you're still using 3 meg. He said, can't be. So wait a minute, and look it up and said, have you got a Roku device? Oh yeah, but we're not watching TV at the moment. But the Roku device is still streaming the data there, and that was what was causing the problem. We had another case like that where somebody had gone and bought backup software to the internet, and they were streaming data out to the internet, fully using the upload bandwidth, which then affect the ACS and that coming back and slow down the service coming in. But you can diagnose this remotely without going out there, because the problem is if you go out there, are you going to find the same situation when you go out there? We had one doctor, anesthetist, and she got service from us and was really happy with it. And then she started complaining. Every night she gets back from work, she worked for UC Davis, gets back from work, she tries using the internet, she says it sucks. So she just shuts it down and then gives up and sends us a flaming email. Goes on, and each time we test, can't find anything wrong. We send people out there, can't find anything wrong. And finally, she, frustrated, went to UC Davis IT people. And one of them came out to her home with her that evening. What was happening, she would go out there, turn her laptop on, it would go down, start downloading Microsoft upgrades. Service performance would go to hell. She get the hell in, close it up, give up. Next evening she opens it up, it would start downloading the upgrades again. And it was just a vicious circle there. It was the IT guy who found, he said, listen, just let it finish doing the upgrades and then see how it works. And sure enough, that was the problem. But you know, that's the sort of thing that can happen there. When it comes to slow service too, of course, if with the wireless devices, if you've got a really poor signal strength, you're going to get poor performance. Because you can get in and you can see what's happening, you can say to the customer, okay, where are you now? Your service is bad. I'm in the bedroom. Where's your AP? Well, the AP is down the other end of the house in the kitchen. Well, walk down to the kitchen. You see the signal strength come up. Now run the test. Oh, everything's great. The problem isn't us. The problem's the coverage in the home. Then it's the case you can say, okay, you know, the best idea is to put in a wired repeater. And that's when we go to, you know, that sort of thing for them as an upgrade. By the way, what we do on the tech support side, I got engineering people in tech support, but we don't do installs. We have contractors who do that because it's very hard to keep a contractor busy 5 days a week, or a person busy, or 2 people busy 5 days a week doing installs. So that we contract out. And this is where they pick up a lot of work like that, where these enhancements to services in homes. Of course, the other thing there is interference. Interference to the CPE, which, as I showed you earlier, you can pick up, because you can do the scan. You'll be able to see if it's generated in the home or the home next door or something close by. Then, of course, the home wireless interference is a big issue. HP printers being one of the problems that we found, something being on the same channel. And you know, you go in there, and if you've got something that's an AP and you do a scan and the signal strength's -16, I mean, you've got a problem. You don't want anything sitting around -16 around there. It's sitting right next door to the actual CPE. You know, one of those things on the coverage area, I never forget, there was one where I went out and they were really happy with everything except in one section of the house. And I went out there, and the router was sitting on the table, and next to it was this big popcorn machine, metal thing, perfect screen to stop any signals going in that direction. So sometimes you do have to go out and see what's going on. I mentioned the 2G, 5G, and that we saw the iOS issues. And then, of course, we've overcome that by giving 2 different SSIDs. And then, of course, signal strength with location. The thing to remember is bigger is not always better. We had one place where the walls were concrete walls. It was one very rich person built a motor pool. It's basically where he keeps his car collection. And he's got an apartment, an office, and all the things on the one end. But this building is built really well and with a lot of rebar in it and everything else. And there we actually put little APs in each of the rooms, turn the signal strength down, and provide the coverage. You know, as I tell people, if one AP will do everything the way that the Best Buy guys say, then why does the Levi's Stadium in California have over 1,000 APs in the stadium to provide the coverage if one will do it? One thing that you have, if you have the managed service, there are certain times where you may get things which you can't replicate by being off-site. But if you go configure a VPN server on that router, you can VPN into the customer router from remotely, and now you are as though you're in his home. So if he says, I can't get out to certain websites, which is, we've seen at times, you can VPN into that router, go out and try going to that site from your laptop, and at the same time, you're now at the data center or you're not. You can do the diagnostics, so you can run tests from the customer's router as though you were a PC attached to it, and you can monitor and see what's going on. So you can get the same experience the customer's getting. So when all else fails, you have that available if you have the managed service with all the capabilities in it. And I think this is where you see that MikroTik has a tremendous set of tools in it, and we found it be invaluable in how we've handled things. So that's all from me. If there are any questions, I'd love to answer them for you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with over 1,000 customer devices out there, how are you managing them? How are you, keeping track of them?
The management system we use, we have 2 management systems for the network. We use PRTG, which is our main one for our network, and then we use Sonar, which is our billing and everything else system. And so that's where we got it there. So we can look it up by, if a call comes in, by the phone number, the person's name, whatever it is, and we see exactly what equipment's installed at the site. So, yep, that's all done through a product called Sonar.
Okay. I had one other quick question, too, if I could. Just to hone in on one thing you said about you use the routers as a PoE for your CPEs, correct? We do something similar to that with hex routers, and just one thing I've seen, just curious if you've seen this at all. As our CPs, we use Ubiquiti AC equipment and M series for some of our repeaters to send out. We've had no problems with the M series using MikroTik PoE, but we've had some issues with AC equipment, and just curious. I don't know if that's what you use, but if you've seen any problems with the PoE and like equipment uptime.
Yeah, not meant to use the U word, yeah, but yeah, I explained to you why we don't use MikroTik wireless. Maybe that's a fairer way of putting it. Unfortunately, MikroTik hasn't got the licensing approvals for the UNNI2 band, so we're limited frequencies. So yep, we use Ubiquiti equipment as well. There are problems with some of the Ubiquiti devices in automatic power up with the MikroTiks. So some of them we have to force the power on. So you have to go into PoE tab, force power on. And that's what it takes on some of them. Yeah. Yeah, as you say, the M series, yep, those weren't a problem. The more the legacy stuff, that will power up, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
More questions?
So how do you handle when customers want to have their own control, like for port forwarding and things like that? Sounds like you do all that yourself.
We do all the port forwarding for them. They don't have to do anything. So, you know, what they do in their routers, if they want to put a router in, you know, we just at that point, you know, so we basically everything is natted to the bridged ports behind. What they put behind then is up to them. If they're pulling an IP, if they're routed completely, then what they do behind is their problem. What we find is that there have been one or two people that have tried, and these have been IT people who've tried saying, okay, I want control, I want the MikroTik router. And they've given up very quickly. They decided it's beyond their capabilities. They're used to just a GUI interface and doing things very simply. And they don't understand that, you know, it takes a bit more. MikroTik is not as user-friendly as, well, let's put it this way. The Linksys may look very user-friendly, but the capabilities you have because of what that interface isn't as much. But no, generally we find customers give up very, very, very quickly on trying to do anything like that themselves. Typically they connect the stuff in, and they take an address from us. They might have something like an Apple airport or something that they've attached they're using for the Wi-Fi, and we turn our Wi-Fi off. But we can still turn it on or scan in the background there and still see what's going on. So even although it's their Wi-Fi network, you know, we can say, okay, we can see you've got this device in your home, it's interfering with this. Look, yeah, we've captured it. Ball's in your court to fix it. Or you can decide to choose and we'll come replace the equipment with MikroTik equipment. Any other questions? No? Oh, one over here.
So you said you use Sonar to manage the routers themselves, or?
Sorry?
You use Sonar to manage the routers?
No, Sonar doesn't manage them. It's our management system. We don't have to, there's no real management you have to do in them normally.
Upgrades, mass changes, things like that.
We don't have any automatic upgrade things, and we haven't set things for automatic upgrades. What we tend to do is when new releases come out with something, is we will choose, we've got 65 tower sites. We would choose a site and then implement the upgrades there on a limited basis. And, you know, or if it's new equipment that comes out, we put it in somewhere, use that as a test site before we roll it out or roll upgrades out. But typically, no, that's something we haven't automated or got a system to do, right?
So upgrades are done manually?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what we do is we can see what all the software releases are. If we know there's something we have to, yeah, it is being done manually. If we go into, for any reason, one of the engineers goes into a customer piece of equipment, they check basic parameters that are there, and like software upgrades is one of the things. Graphing is another one of the things, so we turned that on only a few years ago, and just make sure that everybody's got it turned on. Things like the clock in the log is correct, because, you know, if you've got a log and the clock is not correct, it's pretty meaningless knowing that there was an error at, you know, whatever time it says, and that's not, you can't relate to when that was. Yeah. One there.
One of the problems that we found that we can't find, that people don't want to pay for, but they go out and they buy their Hewlett-Packard printer or whatever, and it turns into an AP, and then they go buy their camera system at Sam's or wherever, and that has its own AP, and on 2G there's only 3 channels that you can use, and you get there and all three of them, your router and the other two are fighting with each other. So, and then whenever you finally see that that's happening, but nobody wants to pay for you to drive out there and fix their problems. So you just got to decide whether you want to keep the customer or not.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest problems that we do see out there. But the thing we can do, this is where we can do that scan. We can show the customer that exactly what's happening there. You know, send them a thing back in email. Look, you've got 2 devices, and unfortunately, we have to send a little thing explaining that in the 2 gig band there's only 11 channels, of which only 3 don't overlap, and this is the problem you have. And yeah, what we do is say, you know, call Hewlett-Packard and ask them to turn out how you turn off the direct mode, because that's what causing the problem. That is a big problem, and it's worst case in that 2 gig band, because so many of the devices just. Samsung refrigerators do the same thing when they come up. They decide they can be an access point. And I'll never forget the first time we said, but you got the Samsung device here. Right? What have you bought from Samsung lately? Only a refrigerator. That was a few years back when we heard about that. But you know what they're doing, of course, is the reason they're putting the internet into everything. Samsung can do diagnostics, so the serviceman knows exactly what's wrong before he even goes there and what parts to take with. Yeah.
Just curious, do you require the managed service with your customers, and have you had any problem from a sales perspective, you know, like to get them to do that, you know, versus going out and buying a router, you know, like thinking I got to pay this reoccurring fee versus, you know, just a one-time fee for a Linksys from Walmart?
Sorry, I didn't hear you too well, but with regard to problems of recurring fees and that type of thing. We have the one-time charge when we install it. We charge $245, which is basically a break-even price. Depending on what's in the kit, we may lose $1 or $2, plus or minus. But that's the charge they have there. Other than that, they just pay for the service, and we have service levels from 3 to 25 megabits per second. So they can choose the level they want there. Then what we also do is that if it's a referral from an existing customer, that customer gets a $50 check in the mail back. So basically from month 2, everything's cash positive on it. But we don't nickel and dime them like the other broadband services where you're paying this much for that and this much for that, and your service starts off at this price, and then when you add all the other pieces in, $10 or $12 for modem and whatever it is, it becomes a lot more expensive. Sorry, did that address what you wanted to know? Okay, good, thanks. Anyone else? Thank you very much.